Hey there, hope you're doing really well on this Monday and that you had a nice weekend. We have, I think, two emails and maybe two comments that we're going to talk about today. And as always, no medical advice, just general thoughts and comments that I hope will be really helpful. With that said, let's start here. So a couple of emails from Vincent. I think the first one was here 4 days ago, was it? Yes, it is. Where Vincent wrote the following: Daniel, I put a chair next to my bed so that I have to watch TV sitting on the chair. Not that I'm currently watching TV while lying down in bed. I don't want to overthink this. What do you think? Is it enough for sleep reconditioning? So Vincent here wondering, can I put a chair next to my bed so that I don't watch TV in bed, but rather in the chair, so I don't start conditioning myself, associating watching TV with being in my bed. And then following that, we have another email that was 3 days ago now. Hi, Dan, here's a picture. I think it's a good idea so I can't associate watching TV and wakefulness while lying in bed. And then finally, 20 hours ago, I've moved my TV to my small house to put the TV. Hopefully my mind don't associate TV with wakefulness. And so, you mentioned here, Vince, or Vincent, that you don't want to kind of overthink it. I think that was very insightful. I think the most important thing I have to say on this topic is the following, that I think that one super important thing when it comes to insomnia is the following, that we often get the sense that sleep is complex, that a lot of things play a role, that maybe I should be doing this, but not that. Maybe you should do a little more of this and less than that. My belief is that it's very important to think of sleep as very simple, very simple. If you are sleepy enough, if you have enough of that sleep drive, the gas, if you will, the sleepiness, the need for sleep, and you don't have too much of that break, the kind of hyperarousal, the worry, the preoccupation, the overthinking that keeps you from sleeping, you will sleep. And what you're doing, Vincent, I know you're working with Martin Reed, not Martin Riedel, who is apparently a circus artist. We learned from somebody recently, Martin Reed, R-E-E-D, who's an insomnia coach. And so, you're doing the sleep window technique, or what's also called bedtime restriction or sleep restriction, where you spend less time in bed. That's to increase the drive so that you have more of a gas, your body wants to sleep. And then, and that kind of really overrides the break. And that's really a very simple way of explaining how the core CBTI, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia technique, works: sleep restriction or sleep window, bedtime restriction, or whatever you want to call it. Now, the point here is that the TV in my opinion, is like, it doesn't matter. Like, should I put the TV here? Should I have it there? Should I watch it? Should I not watch it? All that thinking, the thinking about what I should do to make sure I sleep. What should I do to minimize my chance of insomnia? What should I do? Should I do this? Should I do that? What if? That is the problem, not the TV. So that was a little comment on that. Those are my thoughts on that. And then there was another email from Vincent also. And so this came in 20 hours ago. And Vincent wrote the following: Daniel, I've been having a problem with my sleep window, which is 12 p.m. to 5:30 a.m. For those of you who are new to the channel, I constantly forget to say this, which I should do much more of, which is, if you kind of wonder what am I talking about, then you can go back to the first couple of videos where I go over the real basics, But a sleep window is a time period during which you're allowed to sleep, so to speak. So in Vince's case, it's like he can go to bed as early as midnight and get out of bed. He should get out of bed by 5:30. So he has like a 5.5 hour period where he is allowed to sleep. That's kind of how it works. And now he says, I usually yawn and feel sleep at 10:30 to 11:30. Last night I tried to sleep at 11 because I was yawning and stretching my eyes. I was wondering if I can be flexible on a sleep window. Can I sleep at 10:30 to 11:30 and still wake up at 5:30 a.m.? This is because if I don't sleep at night, maybe I'm having a little bit of sleep and I can go to work. If I sleep at midnight and wake up at 5:30, I have difficulty waking up like a zombie and end up not going to work at all because of this for 4 days. And I need not to screw up my work attendance because my boss is getting mad at me. Can my sleep window be flexible, like 10:30 to midnight and wake up at 5:30 p.m.? I think you mean a.m. But this is, I would say, talk to Martin, and it's very important. Again, the ambiguity is so detrimental when it comes to sleep and insomnia, meaning the thinking about, like, should I do this or should I do that? Should I tweak this? Should I tweak that? Is the problem. And so set it and forget is super important. And when I say set it and forget it, what I mean, well, you set a sleep window. You decide, I'm not going to go to bed before midnight and I'm going to go up at 5:30, for example. And then you just don't question it. Let's like do it for at least, 2 weeks or something like that before even starting to like question it. Set it and forget it. And the forget it part is like, apart from having the sleep window and, doing whatever reading that in your case, your coach wants you to do, apart from that, try to shift attention completely away from sleep. Don't think about sleep. Don't, try to avoid Googling and researching things like that. I think that's the best thing. And then, like you said something else important here. I had difficulty waking up. Like I feel like a zombie and I'm not going to work at all. That, there's a lot of questions that come up there, like, meaning, did you end up actually sleeping in those days? Because that sleeping in can be really, really problematic when you want to try to get past your insomnia, because it starts shifting everything. Wake up time is super important to keep consistent. And I always like to use this 17-hour rule to illustrate. So let's say somebody sleeps 7 hours. Well, that means, guess what? That they need 17 hours. So 24 minus 7, they need 17 hours to produce 7 hours of sleep. So their body needs to be awake for 17 hours for them to sleep 7 hours. So if that person gets up at 7 a.m., well, guess what? They're going to be probably sleeping around midnight, because that's 17 hours later. If that person goes to bed, gets up at 9 a.m., well, guess what? They're not going to be able to, or be ready to sleep before 2 a.m. So you can see how the wake up time really matters. So that's one reason it's important to try to get up same time every day, even if you had very little sleep. Second one is like the psychological one. The really big psychological step to take when you're trying to get past insomnia is not to chase sleep, not to want sleep, not to beg for sleep, not to pray sleep, not to want sleep. The wanting to sleep, trying to preserve sleep, protect sleep, etc., creates so much anxiety, preoccupation, attention to sleep, etc. It just keeps feeding the insomnia. So it's important to get up at the same time every morning, even if you slept very little, so you get away from that whole thinking of trying to protect your sleep. And ultimately, like it's a kind of a mind twist there. Like the more you try to protect your sleep, the less you get, because of that, all that attention that goes to it. But when you start being like, I get up every morning, same time, even if I slept very little, another apart from what we talked about before, like the shift in the kind of circadian rhythm and the shift in sleep patterns, and that's a problem with getting up too late. But another one is that you're still in this mindset of like, I need to sleep, I need to get more sleep, I need to protect my sleep, which is so detrimental. And then another one is like, if you start accommodating insomnia, if you start, saying, I really hardly slept the night, I have to get a little bit of sleep today, then, and I'm not going to go to work, for example, or I'm not going to see my friends, or I'm not going to do this and that. Well, guess what? Then you're empowering the insomnia. It's taking a part of your life kind of away from you, and you're in a way feeding it. So another reason it's really important to be consistent with your wake up time. So Vincent, I can see you're doing a lot of work. I think just work with Martin, and I'm sure you're going to get to a place of really good sleep. Okay. That was Vincent, and then we have that. Let's move over here to our comment section. Now, just a quick one here from SOC Master, who said today, I still have dreams, which I remember. My body does not feel tired, but I have irritating watery eyes after sleeping 6 hours each night. Is watery eyes normal? You know, watery eyes is not something that I hear a lot about when people describe how they have trouble sleeping. They're kind of scratching their eyes and you know, feeling kind of irritation. That's pretty common. I hear that quite a lot. But I think I wanted to make a wider point here, which is the following: that when we have trouble sleeping, there's often a tendency towards attributing almost anything negative emotions, negative thing that happened to sleep. So it could be, you know, somebody's having some headaches and say that's because I didn't sleep well. I can't focus, that's because I didn't sleep well. I was not in a good mood because I didn't sleep well, etc., etc. And this builds up so much pressure because you may start feeling like I've got, you know, all everything, my headaches, my performance, my habits, everything would be better if I slept more, and that creates so much pressure. Like I gotta sleep, that really backfires. So it's always good to question like things like, is that really because I didn't sleep well? And when you can get to a point where you feel like sleep has some, you know, has some impact, of course, but sleep doesn't, it's not everything. A lot of other things play a role. It doesn't matter too much if I sleep well or not, and you're gonna start sleeping really good. That's kind of another, like the paradox of this is like the less importance you place on sleep, the better you will sleep. So that's what this little comment there. Again, the watery eyes, I don't know what's going on with that. Talk to your doctor, of course, but that's just a kind of a wider point there. And then thanks, Joe Vale, for sharing your thoughts on HRT and CBTI for menopause. Really appreciate that. Now, we're going to go over one more comment and then a pretty long email. So let's go over this one first. This is a comment on Talking Insomnia number 15, which I uploaded actually earlier today. It's the first time in a while that I've had a podcast guest. So I thought those episodes are always good. So if you want to tune into that one, is good. Talking Insomnia number 15. Anyway, Bassil said the following on a comment here. Hi, Daniel. I'm a new sufferer to insomnia. I started to suffer about 2 months ago. And what is really bothering me is that each time I go to bed, I feel so stressed, and a lot of weird and unmeaningful ideas start jumping to my head. Recently, I've tried to start sleep restriction method, but it does not work with me. And the idea that I will just get 5.5 hours in bed is intimidating. But some days in the last week, I got 6 hours of interrupted sleep. And sometimes I got nights with no sleep. Knowing that I usually now fall asleep after hours from going to bed, which really compromised my whole issue. So what is the best thing you would recommend to me? So again, nothing is specific recommendation to anyone, but here are my general thoughts when I read this. So first of all, 2 months is a long time to not sleep well, no doubt about that. But somebody like yourself, Bassil, is in a much better place than somebody who's had insomnia for like years or even decades. What happens is after years and years of trouble sleeping, so many unhelpful beliefs and habits and thought processes and efforts and all that's develop, and it can take a really long time to reverse a lot of that thinking. So you are in a good place, and it's always good to be positive. That's a big positive. Another big positive is that you come across CBTI, sleep restriction, pretty early on, which a lot of people don't. That's another positive. And another thing that I also always like to point out is like you can remember a time when you slept well, and you know nothing has changed. You're still the same person. You're breathing the same air. You're sleeping in the same place, I'm assuming. So there's no reason whatsoever to believe that you shouldn't be able to sleep just as well as you did a couple of months ago now. Okay, so getting a little bit more, towards details here. Weird thoughts, meaningless ideas, jumping. They jump into my head. Nothing of this is unusual, and I say that not to belittle your problem, but just to say that all of this is typical. And it's always good to think of your insomnia as typical, ordinary, plain old insomnia, nothing special with it. The more we think of it as just plain old ordinary insomnia, the easier it gets to get past it. The more we think of it as bizarre, strange, unusual, the longer it takes to get past it. Now, you bring up a really good point, which is the following, that sometimes if you have a very tight sleep window, like 5 hours, 5.5 hours, that can provoke a lot of, it can be stressful because you're like, okay, that's it. I only have 5.5 hours to sleep. If somebody is like disciplined and like really gets up at their wake up time, and they are able to stay up and etc., I think generally speaking, with time it will work, although initially you'd be very stressed and it can take a long time because of that, the fear of like, oh, I only have 5.5 hours. The pressure can keep you from sleeping, but eventually I bet you would get to a point where you're, even though you're stressed about it, you would start nodding off and you'd be like, oh, this is kind of working. And I think that can work over time for sure. But kind of another approach or another thought I have is that my personal belief is starting to shift a little bit from like, I no longer think it's super important to have a really tight sleep window. And I think a kind of a bigger sleep window, but one that you can, that you don't feel is going to be a problem to stick to, maybe better, because the important thing TB type methods is that you just keep going, that you don't question it, you just set it and forget it. Choose the sleep window, keep going with it. And apart from that sleep window, education that you find, for example, on this channel, other good sources like Martin Reed, for example, or The Effortless Sleep Method by Sasha Stevens, other good books, I think that's fine. Educate yourself, keep a sleep window, but other than that, just keep going. Keep going is really, really the best thing for everyone. And it can take time, most people, I say, will see some kind of like encouraging sign in the first like 2 weeks. Maybe just one time I fell asleep a little sooner, or I fell back asleep a little quicker, or my energy, my worry is starting to decrease. Any of those things are actually big. Just hold on to them, like play them up, like, write them down, tell a friend, I'm feeling a little bit better. Then those becomes affirmations and things get better. And other than that, just believe, there's plenty of success stories on this channel. And my personal thing that I often like to share is that for every single person that I've taken care of that didn't give up, they have gotten better. So I hope this helps, and you'll find, I think you're new to the channel here, Bassil, super welcome. I think you'll find a lot that's helpful here. Any follow-up questions, please let me know. And I believe you got this. You're gonna do really well, Bassil. Now, finally here, we have a pretty long email, I remember, from Sarah that we are gonna read right now. Here, okay. Hi, Daniel. My name is Sarah. I came across your video on YouTube a few days ago on fatal insomnia, episode 46. I'm one of the many people who have insomnia, and Googled it until I came across fatal familial insomnia and sporadic familial insomnia and convinced myself I might have one or the other. I have absolutely no family history of FFI. If anything, my grandparents are still alive, except for 1 or 2 who died from heart-related illnesses. I also have a great grandparent on my father's side who lived into their 80s. My mother's side, I'm not so sure because my mother moved here from Germany, so I don't know my mother's side, but I know her mother is still alive. So I feel like maybe FFI, fatal familial insomnia, would be pretty much a no, but I did see sporadic fatal insomnia. So I want to go over my past insomnia first before I lead up to my current issue that sent me into my downward spiral through Google. 8 years ago, I tried to go to bed one night and find myself having what I felt like a massive jolt or jerk sensation in my abdomen. It caused my heart to race, the skin on my body to feel like it was burning. That happened continuously for that entire night for 2 more days straight, where I got 0 sleep and tried over-the-counter sleep aids, and they didn't help or stop the twitch in my stomach that kept me up. This twitch just as I was about to doze off every single time. I went to the hospital multiple times where they did blood work, EEG, urinalysis, and even an MRI. Nothing ever showed anything. I went 3 days straight with 0 sleep and millions of jerks It wasn't until I was prescribed Ativan that I stopped. Now, obviously, I couldn't be on Ativan forever, so I was prescribed antidepressants, Vistaril. I did have some success over the course of those 8 years with different antidepressants that I took alongside of Vistaril and melatonin. I also took magnesium and calcium supplements for 2 years straight. Although I have from time to time experienced hypnagogic hallucinations, which have also prevented sleep, it's hard for me to fall asleep when I know I'm dreaming while I'm still awake. I ended up getting pregnant with my second child, and my jerks subsided enough to where they were manageable and I could sleep. My jerks stayed gone throughout that pregnancy and during the time I nursed my daughter. Then got pregnant with my third, and I think that kept my jerks gone for the duration of that pregnancy. It wasn't until I got on birth control after that third child and I stopped nursing that the jerks came back. That was 2 years ago. I've been able to keep my jerks under control with the use of CBD oil and magnesium supplements for the past 2 years. Until 12 days ago. 12 days ago, I tried to go to bed and I just lay there, no jerks until 2 a.m. when I finally fell asleep with the help of my CBD oil. I try not to use it every night because I prefer to try to fall asleep naturally first. So I fell asleep at 2 and woke up unable to fall back asleep at 6 a.m. It wasn't a big deal to me because since I had issues with sleep in the past, I've learned to appreciate getting any amount of sleep as opposed to none at all. And the next night it happened again. Only I fell asleep around 9 to 10 and woke up at 3 a.m. unable to fall back asleep. I had hypnagogic hallucinations that kept me up. Then the next night, it happened again, 4 hours again. At this point, I got frustrated because it was becoming repetitive. So I took an Ativan the next night to try to ensure I a good night's sleep in hopes of resetting myself and relieving anxiety so I would have a better night the next night. I got 4 hours again. So I took Ativan the next night and slept 5 hours before waking up and then used my oil to fall back asleep. This has been ongoing for a total of 12 days. Last night, I only used my oil, and I slept okay, but needed more when I woke up in the middle of the night after only an hour of being asleep. Now all the muscles in my legs twitch. I feel slightly dizzy throughout the day. I've noticed no mental decline. My coordination seems perfectly fine. Nothing wrong with my speech, but it's a sudden onset of my insomnia, and the fact that it seems to have led to less and less sleep every night and me needing to use medication or more of my CBD oil in order to actually sleep, that makes me worried that it's SFI. It says it comes on suddenly and gets progressively worse. So I'm curious if you think it's possible, or maybe it's just regular insomnia. I just don't want to go to my doctor and be told it's all in my head, because my doctors never took me seriously for what I know now is called myoclonus, the sleep twitches and jolts that I had previously and still suffer from. I'm in a support group for that on Facebook. I more just need someone to talk me off the emotional cliff I'm on, where I'm scared that I have a disease that's going to leave my kids without a mother. All right, Sarah. Firstly, thanks for reaching out. Thanks everyone for reaching out. I think, firstly, for those of you who don't know what Sarah's talking about here, there's this extremely rare neurodegenerative condition called sporadic fatal insomnia. I'm always conflicted to talk about it because I feel like somebody might never have heard about it, and now they, for no reason, will start to worry about it if I talk about it. But on the other hand, there's so many people that don't get any form of like meaningful guidance or tips at all. So therefore I do talk about it. So anyway, here are the things, like you should always talk to your doctor if you're concerned. I want to say, when you can kind of like, there are two ways to think about this. One is to think about like, what is the evidence for and against the fact that I have sporadic fatal insomnia? Well, we know that, yes, from the case reports that are out there, it's pretty rapidly progressing, meaning over the course of weeks, people have more and more symptoms. When I say symptoms, I talk about neurological things, which you say you don't have. And what I understand from it is that it really presents with neurological symptoms, and sleep is not a concern for these people. It's not like they're very scared or frustrated. It's just that they're noted to sleep less. Kind of like, people with Parkinson's or Alzheimer's, when they have symptoms, when it's obvious that they have it, that's my experience seeing people in clinic. They're not worried. If anything, they're kind of in denial. They know they have it. So it's always the ambiguity that's the problem. Like, do I or don't I? Like, that's always the problem with insomnia. So much ambiguity. Like, what if this happens? What if that happens? What if I have SFI? What if I don't have SFI? What if? And now you can find a lot of evidence that you don't have it. For example, if somebody's had some trouble sleeping for 8 years, well, what is the likelihood that you first have insomnia and then you develop like SFI, and medications have, you seem to have noted that medications help, which they don't with SFI, and there's there seems to be a lot of anxiety, which could of course explain insomnia. So I think that's one way to approach this, is like just questioning yourself and being like, what is the evidence that this is actually regular insomnia? And we're going to talk about that in a second, but everything you talk about is very, very, very common. Now, the other way in which I'm just kind of learning more about is questioning whether it's even meaningful to try to figure out if you have SFI or not. Meaning asking oneself, how likely is it that I can figure it out? Is it even figure outable? And if you come to the conclusion that, well, there's no way to figure it out, well, then maybe you could commit to cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, or the techniques I always talk about on this channel, which are so helpful. And by the way, if they help, well, then there's another proof that it wasn't anything but plain old regular insomnia. And again, like, it's so important for people with insomnia to think of their insomnia as unusual and as usual, and not as strange. Like, I can tell from this email that you've had it's had a lot of impact on you, but nothing is unusual. The jerking is classic. The kind of the jolt, the energy, all that is so commonly common symptoms of what's called hyperarousal, when you're just like, your mind is at this very hyper alert, hyper aware turbo mode, and that's one thing I thought about. Now, another thing I thought about was, I recently made an episode called I can't remember, The Big One. I think I just called it The Big One, and a lot of people have that one. Like, they can remember, like it started 8 days ago. I had these 3 nights where I didn't sleep at all, and that becomes almost like post-traumatic stress disorder. That you don't want that again. You don't want to have those 3 nights of constantly jerking again, and then you do things to avoid that. And that is completely natural and expected. But what can happen is that you may, for example, decide, I don't want to have that again, so therefore I'm going to take some CBD oil. And then if you end up sleeping like not great, but not that the big one didn't come back, then you can start believing that the CBD oil prevented a catastrophe, which then leads to a place of believing that there is something wrong with you, that there is something that the CBD oil prevented, so I probably need that. And that can then translate to, like, when things are kind of going south, you're not sleeping as well, then it's like, okay, what else can I avoid, or what else can I do? And soon you find yourself in this complex belief system where you think that sleep is kind of complex in your case, that you have to do this, or maybe do that, or tweak this, or take this, or not take that, in order to at least get a little bit of sleep. Well, in fact, it may be all the efforts, all the preoccupation, all the thinking, all that is actually keeping you from finally, getting completely past insomnia and sleeping really well. And I think, again, it's always important to think of sleep as simple, very simple. It's just the gas and the brake. It's your sleep drive, your body's need for sleep, that's making you sleep and making you want to sleep. And it's the brake, like your preoccupation, worry, stress, anxiety, is keeping you from sleeping. That's it, the gas and the brake. And again, like, oftentimes the effort is like, I want to get rid of the brake. I need to stop thinking, stop worrying, stop my racing thoughts, etc. Totally valid. If you could do that, that would help. Absolutely. But it's hard to do that. It's much easier to work on the gas, meaning do the classic CBTI and spend less time in bed, so I have a strong gas. And guess what? When the gas starts overriding the brake, when you're like, whoa, I'm falling asleep all by myself, I fall back asleep, then the gas naturally goes away, because you start believing in the process, you start believing in CBTI, you start believing in yourself, and your sleep confidence grows as your foot comes off the brake. And so there is a lot here that's, I can tell that, you had all these blood tests, you had the jerks, you tried the antidepressants, you tried the medications, you tried magnesium, you tried so many things over the past 8 years. It is not surprising that you may think of sleep as strange and unpredictable, etc. But know that, again, all the things you describe here are very, very common things with insomnia, regular, plain old chronic insomnia. And so definitely, if you've had this for a long time, so it can be really hard to get past it on your own. If you can find somebody where you live that is good when it comes to cognitive behavioral therapies and for insomnia, CBTI, work with that person. A great, friend of mine who's really great, Martin Reed, R-E-E-D, Martin R-E-E-D. He has an online program. If you have an iPhone, I have an app called Bedtime with the Y, BDTYME, which is, it's kind of a curriculum, a program, and then I coach too, just like text-based. If anybody out there has an Android, it's coming someday soon, maybe in the next 2 months. But those are my thoughts here. And when somebody's had trouble sleeping for a long time, like 12 years, 8 years it was in this case, it's hard because paradoxically, it could be like all the work you've done trying to figure it out, trying different treatment methods, trying this and trying that, can almost feel like an investment. And it can almost feel like if none of that really mattered, if all that actually made things worse, perhaps, why did I do that? It can be hard to just let go in a way of that, what can feel like almost an investment. And an identity too. It can almost feel like having trouble sleeping is part of who I am. Like it's hard to let go of that identity. So those are some things that make it really more challenging for somebody that's had trouble sleeping for a long time. But I want to say again that for somebody who is committed to doing the work with CBTI and kind of like stick with it, and things get better. For, in my experience, everyone who hasn't given up has gotten better. So Sarah, I hope this helps, and I hope you'll feel better. I want to add one more thing, one more last thing here, which is the following. When you are kind of like muddling through, if you will, you're maybe using a medication here and there, some CBD oil here and there, but you're doing okay, then you in a way are not as much, in that position, you're in a good position to start working with CBTI. It's actually good. It's good to start working when you are in kind of your baseline. That is true. But when things are kind of like, if you're kind of almost close to the cliff where things are kind of heading south, that is actually the greatest opportunity to make a big leap forward. Why do I say that? Well, because of this. When things are kind of going south, you're sleeping less and less, then you feel like you got to do things. That's really, and that can really prevent progress. Meaning, if you're sleeping worse and you decide, I'm going to take extra CBD oil, and then you end up sleeping all right, then you start thinking that the CBD oil prevented a catastrophe and I need to do stuff. But guess what? If you're doing the CBTI and you're not changing anything in a period where you're having very little sleep, if you don't react to it, you don't change anything, and then you sleep better, you didn't do anything different. You just get up the same time, spend less time in bed, and now you're getting through this really challenging stretch of poor sleep without reacting to it. Guess what happens then? You start believing in yourself. You start believing that I can sleep. Your sleep confidence grows. So you can really exploit a period of little sleep to really charge your sleep confidence. Yes, Sarah, I hope this helped, and I think you can do really, really well. So with that said, thanks everyone for comments, for emails. I really appreciate it. Please feel free to leave comments, any comments, follow-up questions from anyone that contributed to this episode. Anyone else there with a question, please leave me a comment or send me an email, and look forward to having you back very soon. Until then, take it easy.